The sun dipped low over the sprawling campus of Tilora Academy, casting an amber glow on the towering spires that pierced the sky. Marissa Dane stood at the edge of the school's wide courtyard, a faint breeze tugging at her long chestnut hair. Despite the tranquil beauty of the evening, unease gnawed at her insides. She was just weeks away from graduating, yet something had always felt off, as if she didn't quite belong here. It wasn't that she didn't have friends or wasn't good at her studies. She excelled in everything from literature to xenobiology. But there was always this quiet, nagging sensation that there was more to her existence, something just beyond her understanding. Tilora Academy was no ordinary school. Situated on a distant planet, it had been founded centuries ago as an elite institution meant to unify the children of various species in the galaxy. The students here ranged from lanky, translucent skinned Xanians to stone-armored Arvasites. Marissa was one of the few humans attending, an anomaly in a sea of alien diversity. Though humans had begun to expand into the wider galaxy, they were still relatively new to interstellar life. The Academy itself had a grand history, its origins shrouded in mystery. All anyone knew for sure was that it had been founded by an alien race, known as the Xhiran's powerful, enigmatic beings who disappeared without a trace nearly 500 years ago. No one had ever seen Xhiran in modern times. Their legacy lived on only in the grand architecture of Tilora Academy and the ancient carvings that adorned its walls. But as far as Marissa was concerned, those were just stories. She was more focused on surviving her final exams and figuring out her future beyond school. "Hey Marissa," a voice called out, snapping her from her thoughts. She turned to see Jari, a sandy-haired boy with vibrant blue eyes and a grin that could charm its way out of a black hole. He jogged over, flanked by one of their mutual friends, the Arvasit known as Kolith, a hulking alien with skin resembling cracked marble. Lost in thought again, Jari asked with a playful nudge, "Or are you plotting some grand escape from this place?" Marissa rolled her eyes, smirking. "I wish. Finals are killing me." "You're gonna ace them, and you know it," Jari said confidently. Kolith let out a deep, rumbling laugh. "She always does." Marissa chuckled, though her mind lingered on that strange feeling of displacement. She felt like she could share anything with her friends, but not this. Not the way her dreams had become more vivid recently, dreams filled with strange, almost familiar landscapes, and the sound of a language she couldn't understand yet felt like she should. She hadn't told anyone about it. Not even Jari, whom she had known since their first day here. "You guys heading to the cafeteria?" she asked, eager to change the subject. "Yeah," Jari replied. "Come on. They're serving some weird Arvisian stew. Might as well give it a shot." As they made their way across the courtyard, Marissa couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She turned her head subtly, scanning the rows of students meandering about, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Still, the hairs on the back of her neck prickled. Later that night, after dinner, Marissa returned to her dorm. The room was small but comfortable, with a bed pressed against one wall and a desk cluttered with textbooks, data pads, and assorted notes. A holographic display hovered above her desk, showing the serene landscape of Earth, one of the few comforts from home. She tossed her jacket onto her bed and sat at her desk, flipping through the glowing pages of her latest study material. But the words seemed to swim before her eyes, blurring into indecipherable symbols. Her temples throbbed. With a sigh, she closed the book and leaned back, rubbing her forehead. The dreams had been getting worse, more intense, more urgent. In the latest one, she had been standing in a vast chamber, surrounded by towering columns and walls etched with glowing symbols. She could feel the weight of something ancient pressing down on her, something calling to her. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't understand the language spoken around her. It was maddening. Suddenly, the room's temperature seemed to drop. A chill ran down her spine. Marissa glanced around. Her window was closed, and the ventilation system was working normally. She frowned, then jumped as a soft knock echoed through her dorm room. She wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, she rose and crossed the room. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing a tall, imposing figure cloaked in dark robes. His face was obscured by the hood, but his presence was unmistakably alien. Marissa Dane, the figure asked, his voice low and resonant. Yeah, she replied, immediately wary. Who are you? The figure stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his robe rustling faintly against the floor. As he did, the ambient light in the room seemed to dim, as if his very presence was pulling the warmth from the air. Forgive my intrusion, the figure said, pulling back his hood to reveal his face, a smooth, almost featureless visage with pale skin that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. His eyes were deep black, voids that seemed to peer into her soul. My name is Cyran. I am a guardian of this institution. A guardian, Marissa asked, confused. She had never heard of any such thing at the academy. What do you want? Cyran's gaze held her captive. It is not what I want, but what must be done. The time has come for you to learn the truth of who you are. Marissa blinked. What are you talking about? Cyran took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. You are not who you think you are, Marissa Dane. You are more, much more. You are the last descendant of the Xhirans, the founding species of this academy. For a moment, the room was completely still. Marissa stared at Cyran, processing his words. She let out a short laugh, shaking her head. Okay, this has to be some kind of joke, right? There's no way. It is no joke, Cyran said, his voice like a cold wind. Your ancestors were the founders of Tilora Academy. The blood of the Xhirans runs through your veins, and that is why you have been chosen. Marissa's heart pounded in her chest. This couldn't be real. Xhirans? Her? No one had seen a Xhiran in centuries. They were a myth, and she was just human. She had lived her whole life on Earth before coming to Tilora. None of this made any sense. You must come with me, Cyran continued. There are things you need to see, things that have been hidden for too long. Wait, she interrupted, holding up a hand. This is insane. I don't even know you, and you expect me to just follow you because you say I'm some alien descendant. How do I know any of this is true? Cyran's expression remained unchanged. I expected skepticism, but the truth is already within you, Marissa. You have felt it, have you not? The dreams, the voices, the pull of something ancient. You are not like the other humans here. Marissa froze. The dreams. He knew about the dreams. How? She began, but the words stuck in her throat. Cyran reached into the folds of his cloak and pulled out a small, glowing object. It was a thin, crystalline pendant, shimmering with soft blue light. This belonged to your ancestors. Take it, and the truth will reveal itself. Hesitantly, Marissa reached out and took the pendant from his hand. The moment her fingers closed around it, a surge of warmth flooded her body. Images flashed in her mind, ancient cities, towering temples, and a race of beings with shimmering skin and eyes like dark stars. She felt their power, their knowledge, and their burden. And she knew, deep down, that Cyran was telling the truth. Her breath caught in her throat as the visions faded, leaving her shaken. She stared at the pendant in her hand, then back at Cyran. I don't understand, she whispered. Why me? Because you are the last, Cyran said gravely. The last Xhiran, and there are those who would seek to use you or worse destroy you. Marissa felt a cold knot of fear form in her stomach. Who? The Syndicate of Vrah, Cyran replied, his voice laced with venom. A powerful organization that seeks to control the galaxy. They have been searching for the last Xhiran for years, and now that they know you exist, they will stop at nothing to find you. Marissa swallowed hard, her mind racing. None of this seemed possible, yet the pendant's warmth in her hand and the visions in her mind were undeniable. If what Cyran said was true, she was in more danger than she could have ever imagined. What do I do? She asked, her voice small. Cyran's dark eyes softened just slightly. For now, you must stay hidden, but soon you will need to embrace your heritage and your power. Only then can you face what is coming. Power, she echoed, confused. Your blood carries the potential of the Xhiran, Cyran explained. Their abilities to manipulate matter, to bend reality itself. It has been dormant within you, but it is awakening. Marissa stared at him, wide-eyed. You're saying I can do that? In time, Cyran said. But first, you must learn. And quickly. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy cloak. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about her life, was unraveling. She wasn't just a human girl attending an alien school, she was the last of an ancient race, a race that had disappeared centuries ago, and now she was being hunted by forces far beyond her understanding. Taking a deep breath, Marissa looked at Cyran. "Okay," she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "Where do we start?" Cyran's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good. We begin now." He turned toward the door, and Marissa, clutching the pendant tightly in her hand, followed him into the dark corridor beyond. The corridors of Tilora Academy were eerily quiet as Marissa and Cyran moved through the shadows. The ancient architecture of the school, once warm and familiar, now seemed to loom with an oppressive weight. Every stone wall, every archway, felt like it held secrets Marissa was only just beginning to glimpse. They passed a group of students heading back to their dorms, but none paid any attention to the cloaked figure or the human girl walking beside him. Cyran moved with an unnatural silence, his dark robes blending into the dimly lit surroundings. Marissa kept glancing around, half expecting someone to leap out of the darkness. The fear of being hunted by the Syndicate of Vrah gnawed at her, but at the same time, there was an undeniable pull inside her, a part of her that wanted to know more about her heritage, about this power she supposedly possessed. As they descended deeper into the heart of the academy, Marissa noticed the architecture shifting. The smooth, polished stonework gave way to rougher, older surfaces. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, glowing faintly with a soft blue light the same shade as the pendant she still held tightly in her hand. She had never seen this part of the school before. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly, her voice echoing faintly in the silence. "To a place few know about," Cyran replied. "A sanctuary built by the Xhirans long ago, hidden from those who would exploit their knowledge." Marissa's curiosity piqued. How do you know about it?" Cyran glanced at her, his black eyes unreadable. "I was tasked with protecting it. And now, I protect you." They continued down a winding staircase that seemed to spiral into the very depths of the academy. Marissa felt a growing sense of unease, but it was tempered by a strange, almost comforting familiarity. As though her body knew this place, even if her mind did not. Finally, they reached the bottom of the staircase, and Cyran led her into a vast chamber. Marissa's breath caught in her throat. The room was unlike anything she had ever seen. Towering columns lined the walls, each one etched with intricate symbols that glowed softly in the dim light. The ceiling was domed, and high above, constellations swirled, projected by some unseen force. In the center of the chamber was a raised platform, and on it, a large crystalline structure pulsed gently with a soft, ethereal light. "This is the heart of Tilora," Cyran said, his voice reverent. "It is the core of the academy, and the last remaining remnant of Xhiran technology. It has been dormant for centuries, waiting for the last of the Xhirans to return." Marissa stepped forward, drawn to the crystal's light. As she approached, she felt a hum of energy in the air, a vibration that seemed to resonate with her very being. Her hand instinctively reached out, but she hesitated, looking back at Cyran. "What happens if I touch it?" she asked. "The heart will awaken," Cyran said, his gaze intense. "And so will you." Marissa's pulse quickened. Everything inside her was screaming to touch the crystal, to finally understand what had been hidden from her for so long. But a part of her was afraid. What if she wasn't ready? What if the power inside her was too much to control? Seeing her hesitation, Cyran stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "You are the last of the Xhirans, Marissa. The heart will not harm you. It is part of your legacy." Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the platform. The crystal's light seemed to brighten in response, casting long shadows across the chamber. With one final glance at Cyran, Marissa placed her hand on the crystal's surface. The effect was immediate. A surge of energy shot through her body, lighting up every nerve, every cell. She gasped, her eyes widening as visions flooded her mind, memories that weren't her own. She saw the Xhirans in their prime, building cities of light, manipulating the very fabric of reality with their minds. She saw the rise of Tilora Academy, built as a place of learning and unity for the galaxy's species. And then she saw the fall, the Xhirans vanishing, leaving only remnants of their once great civilization behind. And through it all, she saw herself. Marissa staggered back, her hands slipping from the crystal as the visions subsided. She felt like she had just lived 1,000 lifetimes in the span of a few seconds.
What was that she breathed, her heart racing?
You saw the truth, Cyran said, stepping forward. The history of your people, and your place within it. Marissa struggled to process it all. But why did they disappear? Where did the Xhirans go? Cyran's expression darkened. They left to protect the galaxy from a great threat, a war unlike any other, waged against an enemy that sought to consume all life. The Xhirans sacrificed themselves to contain it, but their power left echoes behind echoes that you now carry. Marissa stared at him, her mind reeling. And you're telling me this threat is still out there? Yes, Cyran said grimly. The Syndicate of Vrah seeks to control it, to use it for their own gain. That is why they want you. They believe that with your power, they can unlock the full potential of the Xhiran's technology and unleash the very force the Xhirans died to contain. Marissa felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. Then we have to stop them. Cyran nodded. That is why I have been training in secret, and why you must learn to control your abilities. The Syndicate will come for you, but they will not find you unprepared. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the corridor they had entered through. Marissa whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat. Cyran's eyes narrowed, and his hand shot to his side, drawing a sleek, curved blade from beneath his cloak. They've found us. Before Marissa could react, the door to the chamber exploded inward, shards of stone and metal flying in all directions. Marissa ducked instinctively, raising her arm to shield herself from the debris. Through the smoke, figures emerged sleek, armored soldiers with weapons drawn, their faces hidden behind opaque visors. The insignia on their armor was unmistakable, the Syndicate of Vrah. Get down, Cyran shouted, lunging toward the intruders with blinding speed. His blade flashed in the dim light, cutting through the air with precision. But there were too many of them. The soldiers fanned out, moving with military precision, their blasters aimed at Marissa and Cyran. One of them barked an order, and suddenly the air was filled with the crackling hum of energy weapons charging. Stay behind me, Cyran ordered, his voice sharp with authority. Marissa's mind raced. She had no idea how to fight, no idea how to use whatever power was supposedly locked inside her. But something deep within her was stirring, a primal force responding to the danger. As Cyran engaged the soldiers, Marissa felt a pulse in the pendant around her neck. She looked down at it, her hand instinctively going to the glowing crystal. Without thinking, she gripped it tightly, and the moment she did, a wave of energy surged through her. The world seemed to slow. The sound of blasters firing, the clash of weapons, it all became distant, muffled. Marissa could feel the power coursing through her veins, a force so vast and ancient it felt like it might tear her apart. But somehow, she held on. She raised her hand, and with a thought, the energy around her shifted. The air itself seemed to ripple, and in an instant, the blaster fire froze in midair, the soldiers' movements slowing to a crawl. Cyran glanced back at her, his eyes wide with surprise. You're controlling time. Marissa stared at her hand in disbelief. I don't know, I didn't. But before she could finish, the strain became too much. The energy slipped from her grasp, and time snapped back into place. The soldiers moved again, but in the brief moment of confusion, Cyran had already taken advantage. With a swift, deadly motion, he dispatched the remaining attackers. The chamber fell silent once more. The bodies of the Syndicate soldiers sprawled across the floor. Marissa's legs gave out, and she collapsed to her knees, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The pendant around her neck dimmed, its light fading back to a soft glow. Cyran rushed to her side, his expression unreadable. Are you all right? I don't know, Marissa panted, her head spinning. What just happened? You tapped into the power of the Xhiran, Cyran said, kneeling beside her. You bent time to your will, if only for a moment. Marissa shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. I didn't mean to. It just happened. Cyran placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice calm but firm. That is why you must learn to control it. The Syndicate will not stop until they have you. And if you cannot control your abilities, they will use them to unleash a power far more dangerous than you can imagine. Marissa looked up at him, her heart pounding. The weight of her heritage, her power, and the threat of the Syndicate pressed down on her like a crushing burden. But she couldn't run from it. Not anymore. Teach me, she said quietly, determination hardening in her voice. Teach me how to stop them. Cyran's eyes gleamed with approval. Then we begin now. Cyran led Marissa through a series of hidden tunnels beneath the academy, weaving deeper into the labyrinth beneath the heart of Tilora. The tension between them was palpable, but there was a sense of unspoken urgency that neither of them could ignore. Marissa's limbs still trembled from the sudden rush of power she had felt back in the chamber, but her resolve had solidified. The Syndicate wasn't going to stop until they either had her or she stopped them. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a vast cavern, its walls alive with strange, pulsing veins of light. The air buzzed with energy, and the strange symbols she had seen earlier were etched into every surface, forming what appeared to be a massive, ancient array. In the center of the cavern stood a tall, angular device made of dark, shimmering metal. It was like nothing she had ever seen before, part machine, part organic, and completely alien. This is the Nexus, Cyran explained, gesturing to the device. The Xhirans built it as a last resort, a weapon to counter the very force they sought to contain. It can harness the power you've awakened in yourself and amplify it to stop the Syndicate, but it requires someone with Xhiran blood, someone like you. Marissa approached the Nexus cautiously, feeling the hum of energy intensify as she neared it. Her body vibrated in resonance with it, as though the machine recognized her. She placed her hand on its surface, feeling the warmth pulse through her fingers. "And this will stop them?" she asked, doubt creeping into her voice. "I don't even know if I can control this power. What if I make things worse?" "You will not fail," Cyran said, his voice firm. "You are the last of the Xhirans, Marissa. You carry their strength, their wisdom, their legacy. And more importantly, you carry their will to protect this galaxy." Marissa stared at the Nexus, feeling the weight of her responsibility settle fully on her shoulders. She didn't ask for any of this, but running wasn't an option anymore. Too many lives were at stake. She had to learn to control the power within her, no matter how terrifying it was. "Okay," she said, taking a deep breath. "What do I need to do?" Cyran moved beside her, pointing to the symbols etched into the floor surrounding the Nexus. "These markings will guide you. They are an ancient form of Xhiran script, designed to channel your energy. The Nexus will do the rest. Once you activate it, it will amplify your abilities and shield you from the Syndicate's assault." Marissa's pulse quickened as she studied the symbols, trying to make sense of them. They were beautiful and intricate, like a language she had once known but had long since forgotten. As she focused on them, the pendant around her neck began to glow again, casting a soft blue light that illuminated the entire chamber. Cyran placed a hand on her shoulder. "Once you activate the Nexus, there will be no turning back. Are you ready?" Marissa closed her eyes, centering herself. The fear still gnawed at her, but beneath it, there was something stronger, an undeniable sense of purpose. She nodded. "I'm ready." Cyran stepped back, watching her closely. "Begin." Marissa knelt in the center of the array, her hands still pressed against the Nexus. She focused on the pendant, allowing its energy to flow through her. The symbols on the ground began to glow in response, one by one, lighting up in a cascading pattern that spread outward from where she sat. The air around her thrummed with power, growing stronger by the second. At first, it was overwhelming, the sheer magnitude of the energy coursing through her. It felt as though her very atoms were vibrating apart. But slowly, as she concentrated, she began to gain control. She remembered the visions from the heart of Tilora, the memories of her ancestors bending reality to their will. This was her legacy. This was her power. The Nexus responded to her thoughts, its towering structure coming to life. Its dark metal surface shifted, pulsing with the same light as the pendant around her neck. The machine began to hum, its vibrations matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. "That's it," Cyran urged from the sidelines. "You're doing it." Marissa opened her eyes, seeing the world through a new lens. Everything was sharper, clearer. She could sense the movement of the energy around her, feel the ancient power coursing through the nexus, binding itself to her will. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. And then, without warning, the ground shook. Marissa's focus wavered, and she looked up in alarm. Cyran's expression darkened. "They're here." The far side of the cavern exploded inward, sending chunks of rock and debris flying through the air. Marissa shielded herself instinctively with a wave of her hand, the energy around her forming an invisible barrier. Through the dust and rubble, Syndicate soldiers poured into the chamber, their weapons drawn and aimed directly at her. "Marissa," Cyran called, drawing his blade once more. "You must hold them off while the nexus fully activates." The soldiers opened fire, bolts of searing energy streaking toward her. Marissa raised her hand, her instincts taking over, and time seemed to slow once again. The bolts of energy froze in midair, hanging like suspended stars. But the effort was draining. She could feel the immense power slipping out of her control, the energy inside her surging like a wild storm. She had to focus, she had to learn to control it before it consumed her. With a shout of defiance, she pushed outward, releasing the frozen energy in a massive wave. The Syndicate soldiers were thrown back, their weapons clattering to the ground as they tumbled like ragdolls. Cyran leaped into action, moving with the grace and precision of a trained warrior, cutting down the remaining soldiers with swift, lethal strikes. But more were coming. Marissa's head spun, her vision blurring. The nexus was fully active now, its light bright enough to fill the entire cavern, but she was barely holding on. The power inside her was too great, it was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with her bare hands. "Focus," Marissa, Cyran shouted, deflecting a barrage of fire from the advancing soldiers. "You can do this. Remember who you are." Who she was. She was the last of the Xhirans, the last of a race that had protected the galaxy for centuries. Her ancestors had sacrificed everything to contain the darkness threatening the stars. And now, it was her turn. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Marissa closed her eyes and let the energy flow through her freely. She didn't fight it this time. She didn't try to control it. She guided it. The pendant around her neck flared, the light within it erupting in a brilliant, blinding flash. The nexus responded instantly, amplifying the power tenfold. Marissa felt her consciousness expand, reaching out far beyond the cavern, far beyond the planet. In that moment, she saw the Syndicate of Vrah for what they truly were, not just power-hungry tyrants, but puppets of something far darker, far more ancient. The same force her ancestors had fought against. It was rising again, feeding on chaos and destruction, and the Syndicate was merely the tip of the spear. But Marissa also saw the solution. With a single thought, she willed the energy to bind itself to the nexus, locking the ancient power away once more, sealing it within the machine. The ground trembled violently as the nexus absorbed the last remnants of the darkness, its structure glowing brighter and brighter until finally it stabilized. The Syndicate soldiers stopped dead in their tracks, their weapons falling uselessly from their hands. The dark force controlling them had been severed. The battle was over. Marissa collapsed to the ground, her body spent, her energy drained. The light from the nexus dimmed, returning to a soft, steady glow. Cyran rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. "Marissa? Marissa, can you hear me?" She opened her eyes, her vision blurry but slowly coming into focus. I did it." Cyran smiled, his dark eyes gleaming with pride. "Yes, you did it. The threat has been contained once more." Marissa let out a shaky breath, relief flooding through her. But even as the weight lifted from her shoulders, she knew that this wasn't the end. The Syndicate might have been stopped for now, but the darkness was still out there, waiting. She sat up slowly, wincing at the soreness in her muscles. "What happens now?" Cyran helped her to her feet. "Now we rebuild. The Syndicate will retreat, but they will not forget what happened here. And neither will the galaxy. Word of your actions will spread, and many will come seeking your help or your power. Marissa glanced at the Nexus, its once blinding light now a calm, steady glow. She could feel the connection between them still, a quiet hum in the back of her mind. She was bound to this place now, to the legacy of her ancestors. And for the first time, she felt at peace with it. "I'll be ready," she said, her voice steady. "Whatever comes next, I'll be ready." Cyran nodded, his expression solemn. "I have no doubt. You are the last Xhiran, Marissa, but you are not alone. You have the strength of your ancestors within you, and the wisdom of those who came before. Use it wisely." Marissa looked out across the cavern, the weight of her newfound purpose settling over her. She wasn't just a human girl anymore. She was the last of a race that had shaped the very foundations of the galaxy. And while the path ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. She was ready to walk it. As Cyran guided her out of the cavern and back toward the surface, Marissa felt a strange sense of calm. The Syndicate might come again, the darkness might rise once more, but she had faced it before, and she would face it again. Because she was the last Xhiran. And she would protect the galaxy, no matter the cost.